to talk about nutrition. Nutrition for your body, your mind, your spirit. It's time to talk about proper exercise, stress relief, eating well, and supplementation to help. Get ready to take charge of your health because your health is your wealth and the wealth of those who care about and love you. It's time for Let's Talk Nutrition with Dr. Michael Garko. Welcome to the show.
And welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you could. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. Great to be with you. Hope you're having a good day wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing, whatever that is. And I have a variety of stories and studies that are trending, and we have a guest, as typically we do, on the menu, and we'll get to all of it. The one story, I'll see if I can get my mitts on it before I even mention or allude to it. It's kind of important. But I wanted to make you aware that every Tuesday in the New York Times, they have a section called Science Times. I highly recommend it. It's well done, and it's every Tuesday, and they cover a host of science-related stories that are of relevance. And it's quite wide-ranging. And there are a couple in there that stories from yesterday that I was trying to get to it yesterday. Couldn't get to it. See if I can get to it today. When I'm on solo, I have more time to report on and talk about and comment on and share with you these stories, but we'll see if I can get to it. Some of the stories that are in here, I've been reporting on already. I reported on the, I don't know if you were listening or watching that day, an emperor penguin colony. It's a major emperor penguin colony. Has virtually disappeared. It's unbelievable. And in the article, they talk about it's the Antarctica's second largest colony of emperor penguins collapsed in 2016 is how they characterize it. And there were more than 10,000 chicks that were lost. And as I reported initially, the population of this emperor penguin colony has not recovered. And this is based on some science, a study that was done. And the adults, some of the adults, many of them, relocated nearby. Satellite images show, but the fact that the emperor penguins, they said, are vulnerable in what has been considered the safest part of their range raises serious long-term concerns. So said Dr. Phil Trothan. He was a co-author on the study, and he's head of the conservation biology with the British Antarctic Survey in Cambridge, England. And what Dr. Trothan said was, quote, that means that these places aren't as safe as we thought, close quote. And at the time when I reported on it, I said, this is a significant story, and it's a terrible sign. There are many other species tragedies that are occurring as we speak due to human-made climate change. I could probably do a week's worth of shows every day for 2 hours solo and not cover it all. This is particularly disturbing because, as Dr. Trothan points out, it has been assumed that where these emperor penguins live has been pretty well protected for them. But apparently not. It has served as a form of protection for them. It's disturbing. Human-made climate change is not something that's going to happen. It is happening as we speak, and as I air on this air right now live. And it's maybe, I know that there are millions of people out there that are concerned about the planet. I understand. I'm among them. And so should you be, if you're not. And I think for the most part, most people do care and would hope that we do something to turn the tide. There's a small window left. Some climatologists claim that some of the damage that's been done is irreversible. This is not science fiction. This rock isn't all that big, quite frankly. And, when you look at this planet in perspective and place it within the galaxy, within the solar system, the universe, we're like a pebble of sand. Right now, there's no other place to go. This is it. There are no shuttles to a planet, whatever. I'm just saying. So it's those kinds of stories that they report on in the Science Times. They also, which is published every Tuesday in the New York Times, they also reported about how wind spreads harmful microplastics. This was according to a study. This is interesting. I mean, the things that you learn, there's so much going on. The average person, they're just trying to get along, get to work, and raise their family. They don't have time to be digging into these kinds of things. That's why I report on them on the show.
Well, when you're going down the expressway, the turnpike, going into Miami, I told you about all those big garbage dumps.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't need a study to tell me I see garbage fly across the road when I'm going down there.
Well, these are microplastics, Gary. Researchers in France said recently, and I'm quoting from the New York Times article by Liam Stack, that they had found thousands and thousands of microplastic particles raining down on a secluded spot in all places, the Pyrenees, 75 miles from the nearest city. It was raining, in a sense, metaphorically, raining plastic. These are microparticles. The study published in the journal Nature Geoscience suggested that microplastics, long known as a source of water pollution, may also be transported through the atmosphere by air, spreading their ill effects far from dense population centers. A Dr. Dione Allen, one of the lead researchers in the study, said that their 5-month study was, quote, the first step toward looking at microplastics as an airborne pollutant, close quote. Dr. Allen, another researcher on the study, called their findings, in quotes now, scary. Close quote. Scientists typically don't talk like that. They're pretty measured and conservative with a small c in their commentary. And they just want to report the facts. And Dr. Allen went on to say, we kind of expected to find plastics there, but we certainly were not prepared for the numbers we found. Oh, it's Mr. Allen. He's still a graduate student. Wow. It was astonishing. 11,400 pieces of microplastics per square meter per month on average, close quote. This planet, I'll say it one more time, there's no other place to go. This is it. No shuttles yet off the rock. Okay? This is it. We're locked in. You're staying in this hotel whether you like it or not. And we better do something here, honestly. It's raining plastic. Penguin colonies are disappearing. And that's not even, that's just a small particle of what's going on.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Welcome back. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. Really good to be with you today. We can either, Gary, be prepared to comment on what you just told me.
Okay.
we can either legislate our way or try to legislate our way out of this obesity epidemic, or we can teach our way out of it. We will not be able to use tricks and gimmicks to get us out of it, i.e., fad diets. And quite frankly, science won't get us out of it either. It won't. We know at this stage of the game, we know enough to inform people about what they need to do, what they should not do, what they should eat, should not eat. We don't need another study. We don't need another clinical trial. Not to say we shouldn't do it. I'm just telling you, we have accumulated enough insight to provide people guidance. And the reason why science won't get us out of it, because at the end of the day, you have to apply what is learned. And science that's not its job. Doesn't mean you stop the science mills and factories and whatnot, if you get my metaphor, from working. Here's an example of trying to legislate our way out of it.
A Texas bill is going through legislation right now that would permit food stamp recipients from using their benefits on certain foods. So they won't be able to buy some potatoes, corn chips, cookies, candies, energy drinks, anything with 54 milligrams of caffeine per 8 ounces. Coffee is exempt.
Okay, so on the one hand, that's a piece of legislation to focused on food stamp recipients.
Carbonated beverages, sweetened beverages, it does give leeway to juices still.
I get this. I get it. I wouldn't necessarily, if I were a government official in Texas, I probably would vote for that. But, what percent of the population receive food stamps, Gary? What do you think? 1/10 of 1%? What? I don't know. 2/3, almost 70%.
42.2 million Americans.
How many?
42.2 million Americans participate in the food stamp program.
And there are over 300 million people in the country. All right. So you're going to legislate on them. What about, there's 70% of the population, nearly 70% that's overweight or obese. And so now you're going to drop this heavy legislation on these food stamp recipients. I understand why they should not be spending food. They should be spending the food stamps on healthy food. I get it. But that's where you start. That's what you do.
Well, education, when you go back to education, if I would have learned how to eat healthy in high school.
You would have learned to eat healthy when you were a child. How about that?
Yeah, even as a child, yeah. But I would have, in high school too, though. I mean, if you think about it, when high school is when I was being able to make my own decisions on what I wanted to eat.
Yeah.
I mean, because my mom was of the theory, if you don't like what's on the table, you starve. Or fix it yourself.
I get it. But what the point is, the reason why I said what I did was because by high school, your relationship with food was already formed. It was already in place. It's already locked in. You thought you were making free-willed choices. You were already conditioned to make those choices, whether you realized it or not. We're all subject to that. Our relationship with food begins early in life. Some say in utero, based on what the mother eats. So you got tax on sodas, tax on this, these sin taxes. trying to legislate or otherwise gain forced compliance on people. You want to drink that soda? It's going to cost you. You want to buy that? I mean, once you go down that road, then you have a body of legislation. I mean, humans will rebel against that.
I just had another comment from the internet, and one somebody just put food stamps should require you to go to classes to learn how to eat.
Everybody should go to class to learn how to eat.
I mean,
people. What happens with the food? There's so many abuses with the food stamps. That's the problem, right? So now they're gonna. Okay, I mean, I sort of get this, but again, the statistics. There's 70%. Better than a third of over 300 million people are obese, ladies and gentlemen. Are you going to legislate? What are you going to do? You're going to legislate them into forced compliance? How are you going to do that? We tried that with alcohol. It didn't work out.
Well, I don't think people want to be obese, Doc. I think it's just...
I don't either. You never heard me say on air, I think people are just happy to be fat. In spite of some of these talk shows I've seen where they get a panel of people who are obese and they get on there and they say, I'm just happy with the way I am. Really? You are? Have you ever seen those shows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
All right. We're trying to cover the bases. We'll be back. Welcome back. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition, wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing. Jasmine, too, is our guest today. At the top of the second hour, in my monologue into the second hour, I'm going to report on two studies that are related and are quite disturbing. I won't get into them now. And involving young people. I'll wait. Stay tuned for you. Again, you often hear me say you can't make it up, and you just can't. And some of these things that happen, it just defies rationality, and you're saying, what is going on? Many of our young people are at great risk, not just with their physical health, but with their psycho-emotional life, their psychological, their mental health. It's disturbing. As I said, Jasmine, too, is my guest, and he's a regular guest on Let's Talk Nutrition and with Strauss Naturals, and they have a most legendary product, the Strauss Heart Drops. Jazz is up there in, he's not in Kamloops, but the Strauss company's in Kamloops, British Columbia. One of my dearest friends lives in Kamloops, Henry Small, who used to be on my show from time to time. He has his own talk show up there. Jazz, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on.
Good morning, and thank you. It's a pleasure. Hope all is well.
What percentage of your clients suffer from hypertension? I don't even give you a chance to take a breath, do I? I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's all good. It's all good. I would say a relatively high percent. Those obviously that I know that come in with the complaints of high blood pressure or cardiovascular disease, and then probably a percentage of that is unknown. In other words, they may come in for something else, but there is some underlying cardiovascular diseases. So, I would say a relatively high percent.
30%? Well, would you say 30%?
I would say probably over 60%. Have some degree of cardiovascular issue going on and stuff. Because once you really start delving into whatever their health concern may be, usually there may be some, and we're talking root cause. We're not talking just symptoms. The root cause may be, and it may not necessarily be, high blood pressure or even some other type of, but it may be some form of, circulatory issue that may be, that's creating part of what they're dealing with.
Do you ever sit with the clients and you put the cuff on them, you measure their pressure, and it's high? Do you spend time trying to figure out what might be causing it, or do you?
Absolutely. I mean, the initial consultation with my clients is usually an hour and a half.
Oh, geez.
That's where I gather all the information, and then obviously doing blood pressure readings to sort of get an idea of the reading. But I do also highly recommend with my clients that they invest in a blood pressure cuff from a local drugstore and start monitoring themselves. I believe it's a very powerful tool, and I believe it's a tool that should be probably in every household that we have, because I think it's a great tool for something that we can measure, at least gather some information and utilize that information with our healthcare provider and take necessary action if need be.
German researchers submitted a report in which they talked about job stress, high blood pressure, and poor sleep may be, they said, a recipe for early death. Now, that's an interesting trio of variables: job stress, poor sleep, and hypertension. When I looked at that, I said, the thought that came to my mind immediately was, well, stress and poor sleep can contribute to hypertension, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I smile when you say that, because that is something in the industry, in the natural healthcare industry, and I'm sure the medical health community is something that surely we've known for a while. I mean, this is great information. I always sort of smile a little bit when studies come up, and I sort of laugh inside, thinking, well, hello, this is something that's been around.
Where have you been?
Sometimes, for a while, and sometimes it's taken a study to qualify and quantify quite that. But yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. We know that, jobs can be very, very stressful, and the lack of sleep can lead to a number of different physiological health changes that can impact the health over a period of time. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
My doctor, as soon as I walk into the office, when he walks in and we sit down, the first thing he asks is, "Hey, how you sleeping?
Right.
How's your job going?"
Right. See.
Yeah.
Clinicians. I told you need to hold on to that doctor. Clinicians who are really good at what they do understand day-to-day life. In this study, Jazz, they looked at nearly 2,000 workers with high blood pressure. They were suffering from hypertension, and they followed them. They tracked them for 18 years, which is interesting. I mean, this is not a photo. This is not a snapshot. This was a newsreel.
Yeah.
And those who reported having both stressful jobs and who suffered from, poor quality sleep were three times more likely to die from heart disease than those who slept well and didn't have a job that was stress loaded.
Wow.
I know you're not one bit surprised. You're saying, well, okay, what's the news?
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I like it. I mean, it reminds us all, and it brings an awareness to those that may not be aware. But in our industry, and I'm sure you've come across it yourself with the talk show and as a practitioner too, this is something that we do commonly see and come across and often talk about. How things, especially with shift work. I mean, now you've got a job that's stressful and it's shift work, and if you're doing graveyard shifts or whatever, now you've got that double whammy of disruptive sleep.
Sure.
And
Dr. Greg Fonarow, he's a professor of cardiology at the University of California, Los Angeles, known as UCLA. He said, quote, "As many as 50% of adults have high blood pressure," close quote. That sort of comports with the question I asked you right out of the chute today. What percentage of your patients suffer from high blood pressure? And you gave a high number, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're right there. We are vulnerable, boy. The arteries are so vulnerable to disease. I don't know. A number of studies have found great associations between greater work stress and the risk for cardiovascular events. We just I reported yesterday on a famous director and writer. We'll come back. I'll tell you, died of a stroke, early age. We had a couple of those happen in the past 2 months. At age 24, he became the youngest and the first black filmmaker to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Director and Best Original Screenplay for the film Boys in the Hood. I'm referring to John Singleton. He passed away on April 29th, died of a stroke. He was 51 years old. 51. Turns out that he checked himself in to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. He complained of weakness in his legs. Yesterday, I talked about stroke, and that was one of the telltale signs that you're having a stroke. And then he went into a coma, and they had him on life support. And his family decided to take him off life support, and he passed away. Luke Perry, back in March, I believe it was, 52 years old, died of stroke. My guest today is Jazz Matu. And hypertension is a risk factor for stroke, isn't it, Jazz?
Absolutely. It is one of the risk factors, definitely with that. And as we know, and I think we spoke about this shortly around the time when Luke Perry had passed away, the onsets of a stroke don't have to be related to high blood pressure, as you know. I mean, there are a number of different factors, and it can just suddenly come on. But certainly high blood pressure can contribute towards the possible risk factors of. And he
wasn't obese, Jazz. I mean, he was, he wasn't a man that to look at him and say he's a heart attack. No, I'll bet you've had patients walk in the door and you say to yourself, this guy's a heart attack waiting to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we all know people like that we can visually, just by looking, visually see that, they're likely under some sort of risk of, cardiovascular issue that may be going on underneath.
Mm-hmm. Do the Strauss heart drops do anything to address the issue of high blood pressure?
Absolutely. Strauss heart drops is a herbal-based liquid formula combining of a number of different herbal products in there that really address, in a nutshell, the cardiovascular issue and circulation that on different levels. It does support, things like high blood pressure and other types of cardiovascular disease. Absolutely. And in my practice, and and as well as, I'm sure with the company, we hear lots of stories, lots of testimonials from individuals and people, mostly in Canada and North America, but across the world that are sharing their stories with regards to what they've noticed.
Do you, in your practice, do you suggest to your patients to take the drops if they have cardiovascular related issues?
Absolutely, 100%.
Let me ask before you finish your answer. Let me ask you this: have you ever had a patient look at you and say, "Hell no"?
I would say no. I mean, some people, there may be the odd few that aren't aware of the product. I would say a high percentage of people that I talk to, and I mentioned Strauss heart drops, are familiar with the product. And those that may not be, as soon as I sort of explain what the product is and what it's doing and what its benefits are, people often are ready to get onto the product.
Are they really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do your patients come to you because you're not an allopathically an allopath, a physician, a traditional medical physician?
I would like to say I hope that's not the only reason, because I do see the value of obviously my patients seeing a medical doctor as and when needed. But I would say, generally speaking, yeah. I mean, a lot of people do resort to natural therapies, natural remedies, and seek my help with regards to what they can do, and especially when it comes down to. And I was in clinic just yesterday, and a lot of the vocabulary that was spoken was root cause. Everyone wants to know, okay, well, I'm dealing with this, but I just don't want to deal with the symptoms. I want to deal with investigating the root cause of what's going on and addressing that. So a lot of time is spent sort of, really talking about root cause of where these issues are coming from.
Isn't that a feature of functional medicine? Isn't it true that in functional medicine, one of the pillars of functional medicine is to try and get at the root cause?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very important, and I would say that's probably one of the number one reasons why people are coming to see people like myself, as well as other health practitioners. And I'm sure a lot of the people that are listening to your show and watching your show and stuff are probably people that are, with similar visions and thoughts. That's what they're looking for, and fortunately, natural health care is one of the modalities that can probably assist them to look at.
So your clients are not coming to see you because you have good looks and you're a good musician, then?
Well, I'm hoping it's that too, but I don't think I can claim that. But I like to say that was the other reason, because they know I'm a singer, and they think I'm going to sing them to health, which
entertain them into good health.
Absolutely. Hey, well, you know what? Laughing and music, and as you know, and painting and stuff is much more powerful. I mean, we're hearing about, I'm not sure if it's there in North America, but we're hearing about studies that are now being done, especially in children's hospitals, where they're taking dogs in wards a certain amount of time and seeing the difference, the impact psychologically on children's welfare. People, and even with adults, people's heart rates have come down, people's blood pressures have come down by a dog coming in there, and just that connection with that animal.
Yeah.
And
well,
so, I mean,
and they play music now too. And in some hospitals, I saw a story. I'm trying to remember. God, it was a while back. They have put high-end paintings on the walls in the wards for the patients. Paintings, music, bringing in animals. It's interesting. I want to make the point to the listener and the viewer. Functional medicine is not some fictional paradigm. It is a real medical paradigm. I wrote an article where I talked about the different medical paradigms. In functional medicine, they address the underlying cause. Jasmine too, our guest today, is a practitioner and a proponent of functional medicine, where you use a systems-oriented approach, a holistic approach, and it engages both the practitioner and the patient in what's called a therapeutic partnership. Now, it sounds good. Is it good? The answer is yes, it is good. But you have to find practitioners who embrace that paradigm. And by the way, more and more allopathically trained or traditionally trained physicians embrace it as well. We'll come back. We'll talk more with Jasmine too. LT on Coast to Coast and globally. Are you tired of being tired? Globally, thank you for tuning in today. Great to be with you. Jazz Mattu is my guest today. He's a health practitioner, herbalist, up there in British Columbia, has a practice. He's in the clinical trench every day. And he's an educator for Strauss Naturals. And they're of course, they're almost legendary, as I say, Strauss Heart Drops. Up in Canada and British Columbia, specifically, but in Canada generally, Strauss Heart Drops is so well known. And, of course, throughout North America. And globally, for that matter. But it's been around a long time, and Jazz uses it in his practice. Stephen, talking with one of my producers, Stephen Armstrong, that particular medication is, as you said, it's potassium, and I was reading. And this will come up with Jazz. I'm going to ask him about it. Of course, your electrolytes, potassium, magnesium, and other chemicals, minerals are very important for heart health. One recommendation, I don't know if you saw it or not, Stephen, it said do not lie down for 10 minutes after taking it. Did you know that?
Yes, I saw that.
Okay. All right. It's just potassium, as you said.
Yeah, there was different times. That one was referred to as a chloride, and I know there's potassium nitrate and citrate and the differences between those.
Yeah, the letter K on the periodic table is the symbol for potassium. That's why it's called K-DER. The letter K is the periodic table symbol for potassium. Before we turn our attention to jazz, we play jazz, we play rock and roll, we play classical. Jazz Mattu, it's a great name, man. That's a wonderful, and he's a musician too, on top of it, and a darn good one. We played some of his band, the band he plays with. We played some of their music here on the show. That was a first. Remember, Gary?
Yes, sir.
Not long ago. They're good, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe he plays weddings and stuff. You can call him. There are two stories that are trending that are related and in a very tragic way. It's so unfortunate. On Netflix, there was a series. There's a series called Netflix. It was 13 Reasons Why. It's a series that follows the story of a suburban teenager who ultimately dies by suicide. And what she does is leaves behind 13 recordings explaining to those who would listen the reasons why she took her own life. This is pretty dark, okay? This is not one of those, leaving you very uplifted. Turns out, a new piece of research, again, you cannot make this up, found that there was a sharp increase in suicide rates among children and teens in the month after the release of Netflix 13 Reasons Why. And for those who think that media of different sorts and types and kinds doesn't have an effect, a psycho-emotional effect, think again. Researchers behind the study cannot prove that the television show, of course they can't, is the cause of this sharp rise in suicide rate, but there is a correlation. Dr. Jeff Bridge, director of the Center for Suicide Prevention and Research at Nationwide Children's Hospital, said in a statement, "The graphic portrayal of the main character's death and the way she is memorialized in the show is sending the wrong message," Dr. Bridge said. He went on to say, "This study should serve as a wake-up call to those creating media that goes against guidelines for how suicide should be depicted, close quote. Well, now he's wading into water that, you know, he shouldn't be going. I mean, he can go wherever he wants. He's entitled. You know, you cannot legislate. I mean, they're entitled to make that film. And you can't, you know, when you start legislating what you can make, what you cannot make, how you should do it, now you're infringing on, you know, free press. But throughout my training and my education, and I had one of my major professors was a media scholar and had specialized in the effects of media, the psycho-emotional effects of media on people and how it affects people, how TV in particular, he was focused on TV and spent a lot of his career studying that phenomenon. It's just tragic that this happens. And then there's another story. It occurs in India. Again, you just can't make it up. Whereby in India, they take a test. And there's this Indian state it's called Telangana. Since mid-April, 19 students, 19 have committed suicide. Why? Because of their examination, their test results, which it turns out some are contending were wrong. These were 12th graders. Hundreds of parents, they said in the story on a CNN report, have protested the making and evaluation of the test papers, which they contended have resulted in students being awarded incorrect grades and in many cases failing the exam. Most of the university admissions are based on this examination. These kids are put under a lot of pressure to perform academically, man. You're going to make your way out of, and make your way into life, or make your way out of poverty, or make your way wherever, however, whatever is contingent on how well you do on that exam. It will affect the rest of your life and what you will be forced to do or not do. 19 took their life over an exam. Some students said that they appeared for exams but were marked absent. These are more than clerical errors here. Or they were awarded 0 marks in specific subjects that they completed. What are those people doing that are scoring these exams? These clerical errors, in quotes, is the source of these kids being so despondent that they commit suicide. Again, you can't make it up. When you think you hear it all, you come across a story like, so there's 2 stories related to young people committing suicide. One because they watched this Netflix series, 13 Reasons Why. The other because they were, in many instances, according to this report, were given failing grades or given zeros for courses that they did take that they said they didn't take. And these kids committed suicide because they wouldn't be able to get into college. Come back, we'll talk to Jasmine, too, some more about cardiovascular health and Strauss heart drops. High blood pressure is on my mind because I know that so many people listening and watching, maybe even myself, are good candidates for high blood pressure. We'll be back. Ridgecrest. Not living, but living in health. That's a quote by the first century Roman poet Marcus Aurelius Martialis. Living in health, though, can be pretty elusive, can it? It requires a lot of initiative. It requires insight. And when you take a look at the grim morbidity and mortality statistics surrounding high blood pressure, or hypertension as it's called, reveals how elusive living in health can be, even though high blood pressure is preventable. My guest is Jas Mattu with Strauss Naturals, educated for Strauss Naturals. He's a practicing herbalist in British Columbia. Welcome back to the show, Jas.
Great, thank you.
What do you make? I know you didn't come on to talk about teenage suicide. What did you make of those two stories I reported on? The one story about teenagers taking their life after watching that Netflix 13 Reasons Why, and then the other, these 19 students in India getting failing marks on exams that they took and probably didn't fail. What do you make of that?
Well, that's the first I'm hearing of these, and I mean it's very disturbing to hear that and know about these things and stuff, and that do have and the impact that that these have on us on these shows that have on us, and to hear about something like that and people who've watched that doing these things, it's unfortunately, it's very, very sad to hear that. I'm not sure exactly. I do hear the debate. I mean, you're absolutely right. Well, every filmmaker, producer, has a right to share information, but also the impact on society.
Yeah.
And the impact, whether we're reading a newspaper or watching a TV show or something like that, and it's difficult. It's difficult.
It's very difficult. It is. I mean, in your practice, the youngest patient that you have is how old?
I would say right now, probably around 16.
Okay.
On an average around the age of 16.
An oldest patient?
An oldest would probably be somewhere in, I would say, 80s, mid 80s or something like that. So it can range. I mean, on average, I would say that I see patients that are probably in between their 30s and 65.
Okay. What's the youngest patient you've had in your practice that has has had heart disease or some cardiovascular related issue?
I would say I've seen some fairly young teenagers with signs of cardiovascular disease, and this can be from severe poor circulation. And I'm not just talking about my hands and feet are always cold. I'm talking about where we can visually see signs of blueness to the fingertips and toes, conditions like I'm sure what you're familiar with, Raynaud's condition.
Raynaud's disease, yes.
That we started to see in younger people. I mean, it's horrendous. Just yesterday, I saw a young lady, and she was probably in her I'm going to say late 20s, early 30s, with severe varicose veins, and not a result of anything like being pregnant or childbirth or anything, but these is just something that started to come up. And obviously, I mean, the risk factors weren't there, didn't really identify themselves. So those types of things from early signs of varicose veins to, not only poor circulation, cold hands and feet, but where we can visually see blue fingertips and stuff.
What Jas was referring to, Raynaud's disease, is that it is a rare disorder of the blood vessels. Usually it manifests in the fingers and toes. It causes blood vessels to narrow when you are cold or feeling stressed. In other words, the arteries constrict. They constrict. And when this happens, blood can't get to the surface of the skin and affects the areas, and they turn white and blue. In your practice, you're dealing with, I guess, when you do all the intake forms, more often than not, you're seeing signs and symptoms that are being recorded, but also reported to you orally about cardiovascular health. And you said that Strauss heart drops is on the top of your mind too?
Absolutely. I mean, my intake form is 16 pages long.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Emailed ahead, and there's a lot of information because in my practice, the way that I practice, I like to actually, have that visual contact with my clients and have a conversation as opposed to have my head buried in trying to take frantic notes. So I rely a lot on the information that they provide with me, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of information that comes circling down in that 16-page documentation. But
have you ever have you ever had an intake form? You're going through it, and all of a sudden you stop and you fall back in the chair and you say, "Oh my God!"
Many a times. I mean, earlier on we said, these are the people that we can visually see or are ticking time bombs, and you'll be surprised. I mean, sometimes I'll get the forms emailed to me ahead of time before even seeing the client, and so I haven't even physically seen the client. I haven't perhaps even spoken to them. Perhaps they've just contacted me via the internet and said we are interested in a consultation. So I don't like to obviously judge people just by the cover, if you want to excuse the pun, but at the same time, when I'm reading through the client file, I'm starting to visualize a picture as to this person, this individual, as to what they may look like, and sometimes, like as you mentioned, I mean, it's by the history, it's like whoa, and I sort of have to sort of sit back and take a couple of deep breaths and say,
I get it.
Well,
all right. Well, we have patients, here in the U.S., they get annoyed when they have to fill out one page. Your intake form is 16 pages long. My God, they got to pack a sandwich. You're listening. That's great. You see, looking, the more information you have on somebody, the more you can assess them and then diagnose them, treat them, and hopefully end up with a good result. That's what you got to do. It takes a little longer, but it pays off. We'll be back with Jazz.
Don't be stressed out or anxious. Take Hempenol.
guest. It's called the silent killer for a reason, because that's what it is. Hypertension, high blood pressure. It's most of the time out of the awareness of people suffering from it, and it will take your life. Make no mistake. Jazz, welcome back to the show. I was looking at Western interventions for high blood pressure. Listen to this list. Nothing that you're unfamiliar with. Diuretics, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, angiotensin II receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, alpha blockers, alpha 2 receptor agonists, combined alpha and beta blockers, central agonists, peripheral androgenic inhibitors, and vasodilators. You're familiar with that list, right?
I am indeed. It's a classification of drugs that many people around the world are on, and these are just the different classifications of medications that people are on. It's interesting with that list because sometimes when I get clients who are on medications, let's say furosemide or something like that, which is a diuretic, the water pill often it's called, or whatever, I sometimes will ask my client, this medication that you're on, do you know what it's for? And you'd be shocked the number of clients which will say, actually, well, we don't know, it's just for our heart, or it's general, they won't know that it's a diuretic, or it's an ACE inhibitor, or a calcium blocker, or whatever. And, they don't know.
They don't know.
And not so. You may argue, well, perhaps they don't need to know, but I think.
Yes, they do.
Absolutely, having some understanding as to what medication they're on, even if they don't understand the full pharmacological implications, but they should know what they're taking.
From a functional medicine perspective, and you're not unknown to this, perhaps one of the most effective strategies is to replace blood pressure medications with natural compounds derived from food and dietary supplements that mimic the mechanisms of action of the HPB or high blood pressure drugs. There are all sorts of things a person can take. Where would the Strauss heart drops fit into that?
Well, when we look at the actual formulation, these are herbal botanicals, and we know that herbal botanicals contain a lot of plant chemicals in there. These plant chemicals are having a physiological action. And just like in oranges where there may be vitamin C found, there are herbal extracts out there. You can get vitamin C, or you can get trace minerals, or you can get certain vitamins, or minerals that again having the same physiological action. We've got garlic in there, we've got cayenne in there, we've got bilberry extract, common blueberries that we're eating, and how often we're told, hey, these are good for our health, powerful antioxidants. So we've got ingredients in there that are working, just like foods, like functional foods.
Okay.
Which are.
Let me ask you this: are there any compounds in the Strauss heart drops that function as a vasodilator, or relax the arteries so that they open up a little bit?
Absolutely. There have been some studies done on a plant known as Crataegus oxycantha, commonly known as hawthorn, the common hawthorn, and being originally from the UK, hawthorn trees are seen everywhere on the streets. These are common trees where the berries and the actual leaves are actually used in this particular formulation. And these do have a physiological action in terms of vasoconstriction, vasodilation, supporting the health of arteries.
So this is interesting. Alpha blockers, which is a standard medication given standard of care, reduce our arteries' resistance, creating a more relaxed muscle tone of vessel walls. That's what alpha blockers do. Hawthorn sort of does the same thing, doesn't it?
I would say so. I would say so, and there's very similarities. And even when we look at garlic, and I know we've had the conversation of garlic many a times, talking about the impact on the intima of the lining of the blood vessels, and from reduction of cholesterol, etc., and the effects on the endothelium, etc. So even looking at garlic, and then when we look at bilberry extract or blueberries.
What does bilberry do?
bilberry contains compounds known as flavonoids, and these flavonoids are basically anything that's brightly colored in nature is likely to have so when we look at berries and when we look at peppers and cayenne and these types of foods, these are probably containing compounds known as flavonoids. These flavonoids there's a number of different subcategories of flavonoids, isoflavonoids, cyanoflavonoids, etc., and these are having an impact on as antioxidants. They're having an impact as anti-inflammatory. They're helping with things what we just mentioned with regards to vasodilation. So, and again, these are just plant chemicals, plant ingredients that Mother Nature's provided naturally that are having a physiological impact.
Are you familiar with the research? Calcified plaque, there is nothing that I know of in the literature that can get rid of calcified plaque. However, you have soft fatty plaque. Are you familiar with the studies that have been done to show that you have a reduction in soft fatty plaque taking aged garlic extract?
Absolutely. I mean, there are several studies, and we've spoken about these again on the show before on several occasions. Certainly, when it comes to soft fatty plaque, there are several studies out there that will support the removal, safe removal of a reduction of these and help, obviously, impacting the lumen of the vessel, allowing cardiovascular flow. So there are definitely, and garlic's probably one of the most studied, herbs or foods in the world that's got clinical studies and, on PubMed and various different publications, which show this and quantify that.
Yeah. So is the garlic in Strauss Heart Drops do you call that? Is it organic? Is it aged? How do you characterize it?
This is aged garlic. It's got the high content of allicin in there, which is a stabilized, a key compound that's really working with regards to, the things that we mentioned with regards to arterial health. So not all garlic is, considered the same. Certain types of garlic, certain, whether it's aged, certain types of garlics will have an impact. And that's not to say that, our regular garlic that we consume, is still going to have its benefits. There are benefits of consuming that and stuff. So definitely.
Are there any compounds in the Strauss Heart Drops that function or have the mechanism of action of a diuretic?
Certainly there are. I mean, we've got...
Save that thought. Save your thought. We'll do that on the other side of these hard messages that are coming up. You're listening to Jazz Matu, educator for Strauss Heart Drops, Strauss Naturals, I should say, the makers of Strauss Heart Drops. And when we come back, we'll tell you how to get to their website. Sold in fine stores throughout North America, the Strauss Heart Drops are, and long-standing product in the natural products industry. And it keeps people standing long, too. That's what we want. We want them upright and above ground. pressure has earned the reputation of being a silent killer, and for good reason. I mean, this silent killer is even more of a threat when it is a primary or a controlling cause of death. Okay? Now, it can get implicated with other variables, but if gone undiagnosed, it literally is. It's not a matter of if; it's only a matter of when you're either going to have a stroke or a heart attack, and you're going to have some cardiovascular related event that's not going to end well. Here's the question: how many people a day die from a high blood pressure related, cause of death? How many? The silent killer accounts for how many deaths daily is what I'm trying to ask in plain English. I'll give you two choices: 500 a day or 1,000 a day. How many people die daily, and it can be attributed, the cause of death can be attributed to high blood pressure? 500 a day or 1,000?
877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK.
Jazz, welcome back. I know you know this, but approximately 7 out of 10 first-time heart attack victims and 8 out of 10 first-time stroke victims are diagnosed with high blood pressure. You're not surprised by that, are you?
No, not at all. No, this is a fairly common statistic that we hear about, often. So it is something that we all need to be aware of and conscious
of course
of it. And,
as I was listening to you describe, that's why I was asking you very specific questions about, do you have compounds in Strauss heart drops that do X, Y, or Z? When I went down that list of classes of blood pressure medications, it seems like many of the compounds in Strauss heart drops have the same sort of mechanism of action as many of these classic blood pressure medications. At least that.
Indeed. We've been very fortunate that Mother Nature has provided us in our surroundings with plants and plant chemicals that do have a number of plant chemicals, whether they're flavonoids or tannins or alkaloids and bitters, etc., that have a physiological action on our body. And we know that because, when we eat food, that food is having a physiological action on our body. So these plant chemicals do, and in many ways, not perhaps working on the same metabolic pathways, pharmacological pathways of what pharmaceutical drugs that from that list that we've given, but similar ways on the body that it's still having that impact in terms of, working on the kidneys with regards to fluid retention, or whether it's, opening up blood vessels, allowing blood to flow, having a vasodilator action, or whether it's, working on the nervous system to reduce any stress or anxiety that may be creating high blood pressure, those types of things. Absolutely. So look,
did Mr. Strauss, when he formulated this, was that his formulation, or did he pick it up from some of his ancestors?
This is a formula that goes back many, many centuries.
Okay, so
almost 5-6 generations of his family that had used plants in Europe.
So when they formulated, do you think that they really knew that some of these compounds in these plants were going to function? They didn't have these prescription drugs back then, obviously, many of them. But yet they put together a formulation where, maybe it's that these pharmaceuticals are mimicking the herbal compounds, right?
Absolutely. I was just about to say that. I mean, it is interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If we look at the evolution of medicine, and we go back to Hippocrates' days, and let's not forget that that medicine, the first form of medicine, was food and plant-based. So through centuries and centuries, that's what it's been. So a lot of the pharmaceuticals, we know this for a fact. We know that the willow bark that, aspirin is coming from the willow bark. We know that digoxin, a common cardiovascular medication, is coming from foxglove. We know that, certain drugs like tamoxifen are derived from plant extracts, whether it's dandelion. We know that, so when we look at nature has really provided us the ingredients, and a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are looking at it. It's not surprising when they say they're looking, they're looking at the plant kingdom to see what the next wonder drug is going to be, and something that can be done. So, but yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I think it's the other way around. I think a lot of the pharmaceutical companies do look at the plants and say, okay, what can we do? What can we
mimic them?
Yeah, and what can we patent?
Well, what's interesting is that I don't know who the person or persons was. I don't know if you even know or anybody knows the exact person or persons that formulated this particular protocol in the Strauss heart drops. But it's pretty ingenious. Does anybody really know the individual who did it?
I think going into probably the Strauss family, I'm sure their ancestral tree probably does identify.
There had to be somebody. There had to be somebody or some persons that put this thing together.
Absolutely.
Pretty clever though, right? I mean, it was clever, no?
Absolutely. And again, going further from that, I'm sure at that time when they put it together, and with all due respect to the Strauss family, I'm sure when they put this together, they basically looked at nature and said, okay, what do we have? And there may have been some trial and error, and I'm sure at that time, they didn't have the research or whatever to.
Well, there's nothing, Jazz. Many people raise their children by trial and error.
Absolutely.
So trial and error is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes that's all you got, and that's what you got to do. But
it's the basis of a clinical study.
I need a clinical trial to raise my child. Strauss heart drops. What an ingenious formulation. It has the compounds that medicine's trying to mimic. You gotta love it. Sold in fine health stores throughout the U.S. What's the website they can go to, real quick?
Heart Drops for Life, and that's with the number 4.
Heart Drops for Life. What?
Correct.
.ca.
That's correct.
Heartdropsforlife.ca. CA is Canada.
That's correct.
Yeah, Strauss Heart Drops. Take them. Your health is your wealth. Your health is the wealth of those that care about and love you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Everyone's raving about the newest botanical superstar hitting the store shelves nationwide.